when you look at the world through a spiritual lens, through Christ, and then you look at the world through Bitcoin as well, that for Nick is a very strong bullshit detector. That's what I would say it is.
I
It's
think that's a
strong
good summation. Yeah. Yo, and welcome back to another episode of the Nick and Griff Show. Today is Saturday, December 28th. It's 12:19 p.m. We are alive and well again today, Griff. How are you doing? Merry Christmas. What's going on?
Merry Christmas, brother. A lot going on. It feels like there's a lot going on if you're on X. We hit 1,000 followers, so shout out to Nick. He runs the account. People are liking what you're putting down. H-1B is blowing up, which is like a visa deal with immigration. Obviously, immigration is a touchy subject. And Elon's telling people to go fuck himself. Russia, their finance minister, was talking about how they're using Bitcoin for international trade. The psychology of the Bitcoin price seems weird because we're getting real choppy again, which makes Bitcoin Twitter kind of like almost uninteresting to some and very interesting to others. Dennis Porter went off. Nobody's seen him since. The Treasury market is really telling the Fed to kind of go fuck itself, and mortgages are also going up as well. So that's obviously super interesting. But brother, 1,000 followers, and that could be attributed to you. How does it feel to have 1,000 on Twitter?
Man, dude, it only took us 3 years to get to 1,000, right? I mean, something though that we have talked about a decent chunk is like how can we like expand the reach? And we've talked about like what if we promoted some posts and this and that, and every time we've kind of thought about the money side of the podcast, it's like we just like to get on, have our conversations, and do the deal. So, in terms of like social media, we don't use any other social media platform except for X. And, we're just out here posting our thoughts and interacting with people. And man, after 3 years of doing that and, all the learning and conversations we've had along the way, seems to be resonating with at least 1,000 people, probably less than that. But yeah, exciting accomplishment.
Yeah, we're not total fuck offs at this point. Isn't that great?
I don't know if I completely say that.
No, I mean we're kind of still there, but it's like it is funny because when we started the podcast, it was like right in the bear market, and now we've kind of made it out of it. And it's like, oh, Bitcoin crashed, and we're like, to what? It's like 94,000. We're like, okay, it's just so funny. So I can understand why it takes a long time to build any sort of reputation, not only online, but when you talk about Bitcoin, you talk about everything that's going on in the world. So you kind of have to build a reputation in the world where there's a lot of nuance to like everything. There's a lot of nuance to government. There's a lot of nuance to faith. There's a lot of nuance to money. And me and Nick have only been really around for 3 years. We were in college. We didn't really, I don't know. I wouldn't say either of us were super opinionated. We were just playing football. We didn't, self-admittedly didn't know anything. And now we're talking about like major headlines. We like doing the podcast. We like learning from CEOs that have come on to this podcast and talk to us about their companies. It's like a cheap way to learn, and simultaneously it's fun to put something out there. It's fun to interact with people online. We really appreciate it. So it's cool to hit 1,000. But Elon's telling Anon accounts, he's getting ratioed on Twitter talking about this H-1B program. And just for our listeners, I just want to read off like what Grok says the H-1B program is, which I guess might be a little biased considering Elon likes it. But this guy likes to cut. He's all about Doge, all about less spending, all about whatever. And I think economically speaking, some Americans seem to have a problem with that. But the H-1B visa program is a significant part of U.S. immigration policy. It kind of allows people with special degrees, IT, engineering, medicine, and sciences to get essentially a quick green card is what it looks like to me. So we issue 65,000 a year. And an additional 20,000 visas are available for those with a master's degree or higher from a U.S. institution. Not all H-1Bs are subject to these caps. An H-1B visa is initially granted for 3 years and can be extended for a maximum of 6 years. Extensions beyond this period are possible under certain conditions, such as during the processing of permanent residency applications. I mean, okay, so that just sounds like a lot of gobbledygook to me. I tried looking up the salaries because I see a lot of people posting that. I would say that's like the number one thing online that I've noticed is not necessarily true, if you know what I mean, Nick. It's like people are posting stripper salaries, and it's like they're not hiring strippers. So like it's not all the way accurate, I guess I would say. So it's been a really interesting thing. I don't know how much you paid attention to it, but where would you put this in the category of fake and or gay?
Before we jump into more of the details on this, I know that Vivek Ramaswamy was talking about this kind of from a cultural standpoint. I don't know if you read that full tweet. I did not read the whole thing, but are you able to like summarize
Yeah,
that?
let me just get to it. I got it pulled up right here, actually. So the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. American cultures become mediocre, a culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad, a culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World, just kind of like slams, essentially like what American culture is. And it's kind of like obviously in support of the whole H1B thing. So it's just really interesting that, somebody that a lot of people voted for in a MAGA movement with Trump, who like Trump, America first, right, are also now saying America is lazy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just can't help but wonder if this is fiat. And when we say like things are fiat, the main reference is toward the concept of are we doing something that's a short-term artificial stimulant to produce, kind of short-term results as opposed to dealing with maybe a deeper rooted issue? And I can agree, to some extent with some of this cultural stuff, right? We've been a consumeristic type of economy, and that produces a culture of a certain way, in a certain way. And so, like, I don't know. I mean, obviously culture is extremely important, especially regarding building a company, building an economy, building a country, even building a family, right? On the micro and macro scale. But at the same time, it's like, how long do we continue accepting, the root causes and just throwing short-term stimulus at it as opposed to addressing the actual root causes to create long-term success?
Yeah, I don't think I disagree. So I wanted to pull up like some of the salaries, and we use X. We use X for our news. So here we go. The first thing you get is the H-1B visa for a salary of a $900 Chippendales dancer. Obviously, some of the things that you see on X are fake, and they're really funny like that. That's really, really funny. I am gonna say that what I'm seeing is something like this is a little bit more accurate.
What is that
And
for people that are just listening? What are we looking at here?
so we're just kind of looking at a post. Instead of hiring recent Virginia public school and university graduates from the Virginia residency pool, the VA tax Virginia Department of Taxation is paying six-figure salaries, $113,000 to foreigners on H-1B visas to help collect tax money from Virginians. That's an interesting one. So basically, what I've seen on there is that the salaries for some of these jobs are slightly mediocre. And here's the thing. Are they mediocre, or is the money broken? And I think that's kind of where some of this conversation, I think, has gotten a little bit misplaced online, because I understand what Vivek's saying. America is fundamentally broken. I'm not saying that we can't celebrate prom kings and queens and we can't still love football, but I also don't think that we have a society where it's like, I was telling Nick, I'm watching these shows on Netflix, the Three Doors Down, the Silo, whatever. And if you don't have enough of your culture looking at those in math and science, in economics and finance or whatever, but mostly math and science, I mean, to be quite honest, then your society kind of degrades. But also, if you don't pay the mathematicians and the scientists and the doctors enough money to actually do it in proportion to other people in society, you're also going to have a problem. So I kind of agree. I think it's really just a fiat issue for the most part. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think it'll come and go like everything that's fake and gay, like you said. But can you answer for the listeners now, Nick? Are you fake and or gay? Because some were asking.
I think we all are, right? To some degree, or at least our thoughts are to some degree. This really pulls on a thread that I've felt a lot recently, and it's kind of on this fake and gay concept or topic. And when we say fake and gay, I mean it is supposed to be an extreme statement, a derogatory statement. To say that something is fake means that it's literally not real. To say something is gay means that it's literally not natural. It's fake and gay. That it means not real and unnatural, which is kind of fiat, right? Which is 100% fiat. And from a biblical perspective, we can see that the world is very deceptive. There's a lot of emptiness in the things of the world, right? Pretty much most of it, I think, is. And that's not to say all, because all and every and those kinds of statements are typically not true. But I think most of the things of the world are empty or deceptive in some nature. To quote some scripture here from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 14, and this is the New International Version, it says, I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, chasing after the wind. And the word meaningless there isn't the same way that we would kind of look at it today in terms of like something has no meaning. It's kind of like vapor or smoke, where you can kind of perceive it, it's in front of you, but you can never really like grab a hold of it. You can never really get a grip on it, right? And this isn't to mean that literally, right, like everything isn't meaningless, but that ultimately these things in a spiritual sense are ultimately empty. And those things, right, are from a biblical or spiritual perspective. But from a looking through the Bitcoin lens, we see pretty much the same thing, which is interesting. One thought there is that fiat is not real money, although the vast majority of people treat it as it is. And the gatekeepers and controllers of the fiat system are and have been spinning up false narratives to perpetuate the fear and war, which they are actually profiting from. And crypto is a scam trying to ride the coattails of Bitcoin. And so, I think we get into this culture thing, and I think more and more we see that America, let's say generally, maybe we could say the West, is very focused on kind of materialistic things, or the short-term fame, right? You talk about the Haktua girl. Is that not just a product of short-term, high time preference fiat society, where we're just seeking kind of these materialistic or artificial or empty or meaningless things of void? Are we not seeking those things? And this is the result of that. And for me, it seems very much so like that. Now, a lot of times we say things are fake and gay, and shout out to G Money. I tweeted that at him the other day because he said it on our podcast a while back. I think that's one of his mottos is fake and gay. And, so we say that, and it's definitely meant to be an extreme derogatory kind of a statement to call out the obvious, right? It's like whenever you say, somebody is a Nazi, we're not, in most cases, you're not actually saying somebody is a Nazi. You're saying that somebody is being overly extreme about something. It depends on the context where that it's used. But yeah, I think that a lot of this stuff is they're side shoots of or offshoots of, base layer problems that aren't being addressed.
Yeah, I mean, they're offshoots. They are distractions from the truth, but also a lot of it is being done by, in a lot of people's opinion, very few people to mislead or misdirect society. I mean, in my opinion. So that's why fake and gay to me, it's almost more like it's like them saying F you. They just throw all these stories in your face. And then they tell you, ooh, this happened. And it's like, oh, it's like misdirection over here. And it's like, we don't know who shot Donald Trump. It's 2024. We got the internet. We got everything. We don't know anything. Epstein, nothing. All these different things. 9/11, really nothing. JFK assassination, nothing. Watergate seems fake. The list goes on and on and on and on. And what's going on in Syria today? Who knows? But it's really interesting that the fake and gay thing is just so funny because no, Nick is not gay. He's married. I can attest. The guy's probably not gay. But when you look at the world through spiritual lens, through Christ, and then you look at the world through Bitcoin as well, that for Nick is a very strong bullshit detector. That's what I would say it is.
I think that's a good summation. Yeah.
It's a good bullshit detector. It's fun to talk to Nick in the car when I'm driving all around the world and getting that kind of reference in my day. And I think that's kind of why it's cool to hear his perspective. Now, on the topic of not really Syria, but foreign countries, Russia kind of came out on this interview. The finance minister, we know there's a lot been going on in Russia. The reporter's asking, is it used for an alternative means of trade? And the Russia finance minister is saying that we have legislation now. At this point, we can use trade, or we can kind of buy things overseas, the supply of goods, everything that they need with an experimental payment mode. And the payment mode is Bitcoin. So he doesn't really say we are using Bitcoin or the way that Bitcoiners might like it, but they're using Bitcoin. They're not using something else. And they also have legislative confirmation that they are mining. I would say their government is probably mining, considering it is a dictatorship, an oligarchy. It's obviously more communist than what we're used to. The Russians seem okay with that. That's their life. That's their peace. Do your thing, whatever you guys want to do. But I've heard a lot of people kind of talk about this. And what I think super interesting is that it's obvious that once you get a whiff that the United States dollar is kind of struggling, and then you get kicked off the SWIFT system, you know what happens next is they have to find some other means of payment. And these other countries aren't very good at paying each other. I mean, Russia and Syria and Iraq and India and China, they all use different currencies. Everybody's using different currencies, and everybody uses the US Treasury to pretty much back everything. And they also send us a ton of goods. We buy a lot of stuff from everybody. So everybody is on the dollar's tit for the most part. And when Russia got kicked off, it almost will get looked back on as maybe the stupidest thing the United States has ever done if they wanted to keep the dollar strong, or if they wanted to keep maybe inflation low, or if they wanted to be able to stabilize things, because we're obviously seeing a lot of problems when you're lowering the Fed funds rate and the treasuries are going up and the market's going down and mortgages are going up. It's probably a problem. Something's going on with the banks. Something's going on with the Fed. Something interesting, something mischievous. We don't think it's mischievous anymore if you're a Bitcoiner. We know what they're doing. They're printing money. Everybody's afraid of inflation. And simultaneously, they're afraid of the inflation risk. And at the same time, people can't lend out cheap money because they're so far underwater already on all these treasuries that it's a really difficult situation for a lot of our banks. So anyway, to keep it on Russia, these guys were kicked off the SWIFT system. We're at war with them. We're not directly at war with them, technically, but we've sent them like $60 billion plus, or we've sent Ukraine $60 billion plus. And it's just really interesting to me that they start using Bitcoin, because when I got into this space, it was like a fairy tale land that Russia would be mining Bitcoin, using Bitcoin in trade, still using their currency necessarily. Bitcoin pairs well with these currencies. It's not hard to turn Bitcoin into a different currency. It's very, very easy. And they're conducting trade with it because that makes a lot of sense. What else are they going to use? Are they going to start shipping gold back and forth again? No. Why would you do that? It's a lot slower than Bitcoin. Or do they not trust the network? It's been going for 16 years, and they actually have a say in the network. If they're mining for Bitcoin, they're securing the same network that America is securing, that all the computers all over the world mining for Bitcoin are securing. So, I mean, pretty much Putin said it, and I wish I could pull up that quote too, but Putin said there's no stopping Bitcoin. He said that. So what's going on over in Russia is very bullish for Bitcoin, I guess, if you just want to look at the price of it. But it's so interesting in the game theory because, man, Nick, when we got in it, that was like China's banning Bitcoin mining. Now we obviously have learned a lot about the difficulty adjustment and how Bitcoin adjusted to that and then just started shooting back up into the right. Now China's probably going to come on board if they're not already. Because, again, America, clearly, can you guys tell that it's a lot harder to get things done in America than it is Russia and China? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's an obvious thing. And if those guys want to get on Bitcoin and they think the United States is kind of in trouble with their banking system, with how the IMF is using the dollar, with the treasury market, and Russia's already kind of shown that they can have a strong currency while also having a really strong government to fight a war and obviously still feed its people, do its thing. They're like, we don't need the dollar anymore. That's going to change everything. That's like the biggest story in the world. Screw the H-1B, whatever. Russia's using.
I remember whenever all of this really kicked off in March of 22, when they got the boot off of the SWIFT system, there was a lot of talk right around that time about how we'll look back on this in history and see that it was Russia being kind of forced into identifying an alternative money system. And because, right, if you're utilizing this centralized system that's controlled by, call it the U.S., and you're doing something that the U.S. deems not good or bad, whether it is or is not, then ultimately you are beholden to that central authority, just like we are in the fiat system with the central banking system here in the U.S., right? It's no different. And it's now just a handful of years, just a couple of years later, we're starting to see some of the results of that where, there, of course, have been talks of the BRICS nations getting together and creating their own kind of currency. That seems like it's not really had much legs to stand on. It seems like a lot of that has been speculation, but nothing has really happened there. And is it shocking, though, now that they are starting to utilize Bitcoin? Obviously not in like every single portion of their trade, right? But at least a portion of it. And you and I would say, well, no, it's not shocking at all. It's a decentralized peer-to-peer system and network where nobody can kick you off of the system. And that's kind of, I think, the crux of some of this stuff is when you have something that's ultimately neutral, that's apolitical, It has to be that way so that or being that way makes it so that it can be used for good and for bad. And it's like the free speech conversation a lot of people get into, that a lot of people have gotten into recently. Free speech is not just for the good people. Free speech has to be for the bad people as well. If there's going to be free speech, there's going to be, quote, hate speech. And that's just kind of like, comes with it. You can't have something that's free and non-controlled if it's not also able to be used by people who you may deem as bad.
Yeah, well, then also people will get on Twitter and they'll be like, Russia is trading Bitcoin and its price went down. What a store of value. Like, this is no good. This is like not what we signed up for. I thought number go up when Russia accumulates. Where's God candle? And it's such a low time preference take, in my opinion. It's what makes Bitcoin Twitter kind of boring, because there's not a lot of discussion about, all right, this is how cool it is that they're using that. This is why the United States cannot fall behind. This is why it's more like a space race than anything. And I think at the end of the day, some of what you were describing as well is like, Bitcoin doesn't care. Okay, guys? Bitcoin doesn't care. You can't use Ethereum for international trade because you get rug pulled by the people who have all of it. It doesn't make any sense. On top of it being a proof of stake system, there's nothing for them to get out of it. There's no actual money aspect to that. Bitcoin is money because there's a mining component to it. Without proof of work, Bitcoin doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't be in it. Nobody would be in it. Proof of work is as important as the difficulty adjustment. Proof of work is as important to Bitcoin as I think really anything. I mean, I think it's probably the top three things. It gives it an actual material cost. You have to spend energy to get the Bitcoin. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody can do it if they want to. But now you have to have such a meaningful amount because countries like Russia are mining Bitcoin. East Texas is mining a lot of Bitcoin. China is not going to just fall behind, because if Russia is trading in that, think about this. If you don't have any Bitcoin and Bitcoin's getting bought up all over the world with all these different currencies, that will mean that the US dollar price will also go up at some point. And if the United States just falls behind and Bitcoin hits $1 million and some other country's like, yeah, we're not going to give you any oil, or we're not going to do any trade deals with you unless it's in Bitcoin, and we don't have any Bitcoin, and we're like, well, we'll give you a bunch of treasuries, and they're going to go, you guys, literally, your treasury market is like a El Salvador to 2020 graded bullshit. Like, nobody wants that kind of stuff. It's like subprime mortgage bullshit. We don't want it. And so if other countries don't want our treasuries anymore, finally, in like 10, 20 years down the line, this is why, again, stop looking at the price action, 10, 20 years down the line, then we don't have a choice anymore. And so are we going to buy the Bitcoin when we don't have a choice? Or are we going to get out in front of the problem? Because Bitcoin doesn't care. There's no owner. There's nobody that can say anything, nobody that can stop it. But it does speak to the psychology part of Bitcoin. It's hard to accumulate, stack, and save when you're seeing nation states mining it and whatever, and you associate that with like, it needs to be $10 million today. I think it's worth $10 million today. But you have to wait. You have to be patient. I mean, it's a new technology. It's a new money. Money is a technology. Obviously, it is apolitical. It does not care. It's just money. It's the internet now has a currency, and anybody can use the internet. Anybody. We have satellites that can connect to internet. We got Starlink. We got Ethernet cables in the ocean. We got Wi-Fi. We got all kinds of stuff. We got cell towers. We have so many means of communication at this point that the world is so connected, and it makes so much sense that there's a money that you can use in that digital space. So therefore, you have digital money. And yeah, you could say we have digital monies, but I think the most annoying part about being a Bitcoiner for this long is that people think that you can have another Bitcoin. You can't have another Bitcoin. Not only just because you can't ever get the mining power that's on Bitcoin, you can't get the history part of it. I think, Nick, you would agree with this. Any Bitcoiner is a little bit nicer to gold bugs than gold bugs are to Bitcoiners, because we're like, hey, you guys do have history on us. You have history. And gold satisfies money in a lot better ways than what's being used currently. So like, we understand what you're saying. It's just that Bitcoin's a lot better. I think the only really interesting part about Bitcoin is when people are like, it can happen again. There's so many cryptocurrencies. There's so many whatever. But you guys also have to understand, if there's no mining component to it, if there's no energy currency side of it, I would say the same thing. But because Bitcoin uses energy to get block rewards, that makes it an actual money that is tethered to something in the real world. That makes it very tangible. And on top of that, you can't recreate what's happened in the mining space. All these miners aren't going to just go start mining Dogecoin all of a sudden, or Bitcoin Cash or whatever. Those wars are already done. It's long gone. It's been gone. But some of the psychology of the Bitcoin price, Nick, that is what makes Bitcoin Twitter boring to me. I don't know what you think, but I just can't stand the everyday price watching. It was fun when it went up to 100,000. It was like a cool number to see. The next number that would really like make me go, wow, I really want to watch this again. Although it's on my phone, everybody. Of course, we all watch the price all day. But the next one that's going to make me stop doing something like all day, whatever, is $1 million probably, because I don't think it's really that far off. But how would you say, since you've been in Bitcoin, the psychology of the price? Because we could get choppy here. And real Bitcoiners, no, we're not complaining about getting choppy from 108 to 93, but it's interesting that there's a lot of people that will get out of it, or they'll say the 108 to 94 is a crash, and they're like, I've lost money on Bitcoin because I bought the top. What would you say that the psychology of Bitcoin, and as it relates to Bitcoin Twitter, does it make it more boring to you, or do you love talking about the everyday price of Bitcoin when it goes up and down?
So first, before we go there, a couple thoughts on the on the Russia dollar, Bitcoin, kind of foreign countries, this kind of changing of monies of the world. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of a mix between the anchoring bias and a status quo bias, where we have this, specifically for folks that are, pretty much most people that are living in the world today, living and operating in the world today, have always operated in this fiat kind of style world, right? And so for a lot of people, for most people, this is how things have always been. And so I think the bias there in the fallacy in thought is that it's always been this way for us, and so this is how it's always going to be in the future. When in reality, you can look back in history and see that money has changed over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And it's not just changed for no reason, right? It's changed because now, of course, like you can get into like some of the political fiat currencies, and that has very much so connection with the economy or the country that you're talking about. But generally over time, right, we go back and we look at the barter system, and then we go to glass beads, and you go to the rhinestones, and you go to salt and cattle, and you look at all this, and then you ultimately get to precious metals with gold. You ultimately see a transition of money over history to better accommodate these kind of properties that we would talk about are required and necessary prerequisites to becoming a good money. And so I think what's interesting, right, is we're kind of in this transition period where now with Bitcoin, we have a new thing that better accommodates all of these properties of money than anything else we've ever had in history. And we're in the process of discovering that and realizing that, having that kind of awakening, not spiritually, so hard line there. So I think that's very interesting, right? Is we're in this process of like, oh, this is how things have been for a while, but we're looking into the future at something that could be different. To the psychology of the price stuff, I think it's interesting to think about. We had a tweet that got a little popular the other day. I asked about, my grandpa said he's got a large sum. He wants to put some money in Bitcoin. Where's the best place for him to do it? Had a lot of folks commenting and sharing their thoughts on where people should go to buy Bitcoin, this and that. And anyways, while I was sitting there having this conversation with my grandpa, he said, what would this amount of money been if I had bought Bitcoin in 2010, when it was $1, how much would it be today? And, so we're just kind of playing around with the math. And he's like, man, if I had done that, could you only imagine? Right. And the psychology side of things, or the fallacy in thought, is that because we're at the highest numbers we've ever been at right now, that somehow seems to lead people to believe that we're at the top and that it's only going to be down from here. When in reality, this has happened several times already in the past, where you run up to a high and people feel like, oh, well, this is it. It can't go any higher. Wouldn't it suck to be the person who has been sitting on the sideline, not buying any Bitcoin, and to think, whenever it comes back down to 30 grand, whenever it comes back down to 15 grand, right? And then to miss the next run up, and then, oh, it's too high. So I'm not going to buy it here. And then whenever it falls down and you have another crash, that's another debatable point. We might get into that. You have another crash and, oh, it's dead. I'm not going to buy it. And then it runs up again. And so I would hate to be, somebody like my grandpa, where, doesn't have, much at all. He's got a couple thousand sats at this point. I've helped him buy some Bitcoin. And to look at the high price today of 108, a couple weeks back or whenever that was, now we're in the mid 90s, and to think, well, it's just, this is kind of the top. What are you going to say in another 5 years and another 4 years when you look back and think, man, this so far, I think this year we're sitting at like 120% increase. Wow. If you put like you doubling your money plus 20%, are we going to continue to be the people who look at the history? Now, history does not dictate the future, but if we have any idea of what history is, we can get kind of an idea of what the future may look like. And if that's true, the last thing you want to be doing is sitting on your hands and not buying Bitcoin at this point, at least a little bit. Not saying you got to go all in 100% of your portfolio. I think Greg Foss says this maybe, or maybe it's somebody else, but he's like, I'm not saying you got to have everything in Bitcoin. You just can't have zero. And that's the big deal. I think you got to have at least some Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is the biggest deal in the world today. It took us, I don't know how many tens of thousands of years to go from like hunter-gatherers to people who figured out fire. And then it took us how many more years to get electricity? And then how many more years till the Industrial Revolution? And then how many more years until the digital revolution? And the entire time, the money, the most important thing in the world, the only reason that we actually have economies is because we use some form of money outside of bartering. So the most important revolution that could have ever taken place in all of human history very well could be Bitcoin, because that is the monetary revolution. How we choose to use it, we are going to see. Whether that's MSTR as a bank on Bitcoin and the United States uses them as a proxy to create their own cash dollar off of Bitcoin, or this dollar is redeemable for this much Bitcoin, or whether China creates their own currency off of it, or if China is the first to adopt the Lightning Network, if the Lightning Network gets used. How does this affect Africa and all these other countries that now don't have to deal with the IMF? They can do an El Salvador plan and start smash buying Bitcoin when the IMF wants to take them out and say that you can't mandate Bitcoin. And they're like, okay, but we're going to buy more of it, you dumb sons of bitches. We do not care. So in my opinion, Bitcoin, and why it's so funny for the people that are like, oh, I'm going to wait for it to go to 30,000 or whatever. Here's what you guys don't understand. If you look at all of history, money has been manipulated by governments. So we don't actually get the growth that you guys think we're getting. We're not growing that fast. Bitcoin might retard growth in a way for 10 to 20 years as it gets adopted, because there's going to be a lot of capital just put into the financial infrastructure of the future, which inherently is going to pull a lot of money out from whatever else Nick and Griff could be doing right now. Nick and Griff could be in STEM, but we chose to get in more economics, finance, sales-based lives because we also want to make money. And I think that's the only negative maybe about Bitcoin and where this whole adoption thing is going to go, because I bet there will be a point in time that Bitcoin goes up and everything else goes down. Like Bitcoin goes way up. Bitcoin's going up and up and up and up. And all this capital, all this unused money, all this bad money, all this bad debt and everything like that, that's getting sucked up by Bitcoin. Well, it's going to create some recessions, depressions. We're not going to really know where we go from there. What's going to be the financial standing of the world? But it is fundamentally important because it is shifting everything that money is from a centralized, we can't really communicate on economies of scale, or we can't communicate globally with money, to now I can be a business in America and I can go buy and import goods myself because I could just pay them in Bitcoin, or I could go start a business pretty much anywhere because what's the money? Bitcoin. It's going to create a whole different world. So in my opinion, probably the biggest thing that's ever happened, ever, in the history of forever, maybe other than we like figured out fire. But Bitcoin is a revolution not only for the internet, which now is going to give the internet the ability to actually do its thing, to become a place of commerce that supersedes government. How many contractors does the government need that we should be unaware of? Where are they giving our tax dollars? Why can't we look up on an easy website or ask Grok, hey, what's going on with this bill? And we saw that. We saw Grok literally get a bill, which was the omnibus bill, which is the famous, we are going to meet in Congress and we're going to spend a crap load of money and give ourselves raises and get all our special interests involved. And then we're going to say Elon Musk is a bad guy for saying it on Twitter because there was going to be a little money that went to cancer survivors. What? Childhood cancer? Yeah, it's a really bad thing. Do I think in the world of 2024, the government needs to be involved in medicine? No, they're doing a terrible job, and they do a terrible job at everything. I hear a lot of people sometimes actually have a take where they're just like, well, I think the government, like maybe they're not doing a good job, but they could do a better job. Here's the answer, guys. Look at history. Government no do good job ever. Never happens and never going to happen.
Hard stop.
I don't think full stop. It'll never ever happen. And Bitcoin keeps them accountable at the very least. I guess I would say, like, I believe in moderated government. I've been listening to Dave Smith, PBD, Tim Dillon. Want to say I've been listening to like so many more people as well, but I've been listening to quite a few folks. And I would say it's like, yeah, I want a moderated government, but until we kind of take the power back from them and we take the collusion out of the Fed and their ability to go into deficits and issue treasuries and play that nefarious game where the Fed's like, well, yeah, we'll just quantitative ease. Like that makes any sense. The quality of life for Americans is going down, not because there's H-1B visa workers coming in and stealing really good jobs. No, it's because the money's broken and your kid is going to school for a degree that can't pay for whatever life that he wants to live. So we should stop sending kids to school for degrees that don't pay for things. That's the problem. The money is fundamentally broken and all over the place. Like you were saying earlier, fiat has its ways. I think we'll look back at this time period as like, how did we even get the internet? How did we even grow? Because the money we're using is so stupid. The incentives are so misaligned for growth. But America is still this amazing beast where it's like, even if you're an Elon Musk character who, yeah, he got a little upset yesterday, but let's let time play out here. The guy came here on a visa and started a $200 million company overnight. Pretty impressive. Don't think he's doing that in Russia. Don't think he's doing that in China, Africa, Europe, or anywhere else. I think the only place you can still do that today is America. And that's why it's important for us to adopt Bitcoin, because that is what America is. It's a place where you're supposed to be able to go and you don't have to deal with all the bureaucracy. As long as you're not coming here to be a criminal or a felon or not contribute to society, we should be able to take you because our economy should be extremely strong. And we should have a lot of jobs for you, but we don't have.
I think what really muddies the waters in a lot of these kind of conversations is the details. I think if we do a better job of, putting better words together to communicate the ideas and the ideologies that we espouse to, I think that those are the things we need to be fighting for, as opposed to minor details. And yet at the same time, it's very fiat to fight and think about and argue with people about all of these minutiae details, because things move so fast. Things move so fast, especially, just look at the internet, right? How fast information flows. And I think whenever all we do is talk about the tiny details every single day, all day, every day, new details. Go listen to the PBD podcast, right? It's every single day. He's got a 2-hour show where he's talking about the newest things that happened the last hour and the last hour and the last hour. And I think in that sense, it's really easy to, because as people that are producing that kind of content that's hitting on the things that are happening every single day, you're always focused on what's happened now. And then the things that happened yesterday, they go out the back door. And the people that are consuming that kind of content, I think a really good example of that would be TikTok. It's YouTube Shorts, it's Instagram Reels, all of that short form content. It's geared toward, I get this quick little hit of dopamine, and rather than lowering our time preference and thinking about things and how they're going to impact us, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 years down the line, we're thinking about what we want right now, how can we gratify our own desires right now today. And I think whenever we do that, ultimately, we're just going to create not as good long-term outcomes as we could if we were focusing on more long-term things and ideologies and concepts, as opposed to talking about the people, talking about the events, talking about the things that are happening. We need to be putting more of our focus on the larger ideas, which is, for me, the base, I think the base it's Christ. We need to have a spiritual base. We need to be talking about these things. That's an eternal scale. It's an eternal timeline that we're looking at there. Then beyond that, you look at kind of the world, right? We're not called to be of the world, but we are living in the world. And if we're reflecting the light of Christ in our lives, then ultimately we want to be doing things with a longer time horizon. We want to be doing things that are more aligned with justice, with fairness, with grace, I think there's a scripture that says, I want to say that grace or mercy triumphs over justice. And now that's not to say you throw justice out the door, right? But if we're doing things that are more aligned with Christ, it ain't fiat, right? Fiat is literally stealing from the future. We're not supposed to be stealing from the future. We shouldn't be doing short-term gratification things. We should be doing long-term sustainable, growth moves to empower a better long-term outlook and ideology toward the world.
Well, I'll say what fiat is like that guy on your football team, that you had where it was like, yeah, he's a good guy, but like he really, really likes sex, or he's got like a sex addiction. Essentially, it's like the guy's sleeping with a different girl every night. And, it's like, as a guy, you're like, yeah, respect, but you're also like, did your dick hurt? Did you get the clap, or like, what's going on? Like, that's just disgusting, it's just like, it's easy is what I'm saying. It's essentially fiat is the guy that it's very easy for him to get the chicks, and he gets them. He's like, I'm going to get them. He's like, I'm going to get one every night. I'm going to get a new one every single night. And he's kind of like the grossest guy, and that is what fiat is. It's a disgusting high time preference money that distorts reality. Think about this. How many social media companies would survive on mostly ad revenue and data collecting if Bitcoin was the money? If it wasn't so easy, if companies couldn't just throw millions and millions and millions of dollars into ad revenue because they actually got to focus on making a profit and a really good product, how much money would go towards all this advertising? What would social media look like? Does a protocol like Nostr make a lot of sense where nobody owns Nostr? You can build whatever you want on Nostr. You could build websites on Nostr. You could build apps through Nostr. You could start posting on Nostr. You could do anything Nostr, whatever you want to call it. But either way, I think that fiat, like Nick said, in the weirdest of ways, it just makes society such a kind of cringe place to live a lot of the time. Because the hard part as a Bitcoiner is you have to go walk around and go to Christmas and go to Thanksgiving, and you don't rub it into people's face that you have all this Bitcoin. Actually, once you start getting into it more, now that's like year 4-ish for me, it's like, I don't really even want to talk to anybody about Bitcoin unless they bring it up. I want to come on my podcast and talk about how I think it's influencing the world and about how I think fiat is terrible. It's terrible. It's a disease. It's a mind virus. It's as bad as seed oils. There's so many things that have come off this parasitic money that let's just forget the cabal or whatever. The people in charge for the last 100 years thought this was a good idea. For the last 50 years, they thought it was 60 years. They thought it was a good idea to get off the gold standard. So these are the people making the decisions. Even if you take it for face value, that means our government hates us. Our banks hate us. They don't want to see us buy homes. It's not livable anymore. And that's what I would say about the H-1B visas things. I don't know if I already said it, but social media would be different. The way we hire people would be different. The amount of money you would need to pay somebody to do certain jobs would be different, because if you have a money that appreciates against the goods, against real estate, against groceries, then you don't have to pay them as much money to live their life, to retire, to have kids, to do everything you want to do. And that's the weird thing about old Elon. Elon is a smart guy, and he wants more babies. He wants more humans. He says it all the time. He thinks like a decrease in the birth rate is like the most catastrophic thing ever. Yet, oddly enough, don't really see him talking about the fact that $75,000 in California, no kids, no going out, no taking a flight to see your friends. You live in a dingy apartment. Probably, even if you're super diligent, you're almost never eating out, not even buying any good ingredients from the grocery store, eating PB&Js every night. You're killing yourself slowly, making mediocre money in a state that hates you. And it shouldn't be like that anywhere in the world, in my opinion. But I live in America. It shouldn't be like that in America. And that is what fiat has done. And you can go talk to your parents on Christmas and they can be like, when are you going to buy your first home? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? And it's like, you guys realize you voted for a bunch of people that printed all this money, and now the money's not worth anything. So I can't go buy what you bought. I make more money than you did, way more money than you did at your age. And guess what? You bought a home and had 3 kids, and you were fine. I remember my childhood. My childhood was 2008 is when I was like 10 years old, 12 years old, through 2012 when it hit its low. And, thankfully my dad kept his job. My mom still never had to work. And he had 3 kids. And I'm sure times were tough. I'm sure times were tougher than I thought. But we had the money to go do things. We ate out. We took a vacation. We did all these different things. And he saved money. So I'm not sitting here saying that Americans are lazy, but the incentives are so messed up for Americans that it would be more rewarding if I took a job in India and they paid me rupees and I was able to send those rupees back to America because they were worth more. So somebody coming over here to get a job more than likely is doing it to go feed his family. And he's feeding his family with dollars because it's worth more. So he doesn't need as many dollars to do the same job that Nick does or I do or any of the Americans. So I wish Elon would at least address that part of the problem, because it is a functional problem. It's a huge problem in this country. The money doesn't buy anything. So Elon, if you pay somebody $75,000 and the state has a tax rate and he's still getting taxed by the federal government, where's he going to live? What's his quality of life look like? When did we forget that we don't want to just be this techno meritocracy that's, so great? No. This is about freedom. And freedom is directly tied how you have to interact with the economy. I did not sign up for some techno revolution and going to Mars. I don't care. I don't even think it might be right. It doesn't even make that much sense. The guy says he's never seen a UFO and he's got all these satellites over everything. He says that, Bitcoin, I don't really think about it. That's like the last time that he mentioned Bitcoin. I don't really think about it to Kathy Wood. Yet you're hiring people from other countries into our country, and they're willing to work for less because their money, wherever they're from, is worth less. And so it's some form of like indentured servitude. And unless he acknowledges the problem and actually a real solution, which is Bitcoin, because we know he's aware of it, I kind of do have a problem with the guy. It's kind of weird. I didn't start this podcast having a problem with him, but after I worked that out, dude, it's weird. Okay. It's weird.
No, well, and I think another thing too that we've got to always keep in perspective is because a lot of those thoughts that you just kind of shared base our lives and the worth of our lives on the things that we're able to get, the things that we're able to do, the things that we're able to achieve. Now, of course, being able to buy the home, build the family, all that stuff, of course, in this world, we have to work in order to provide, right? In order to provide for a family, to do these things. So I guess I would just add in one caveat is, we are blessed beyond measure. I mean, to be honest, Griff, like, of course, I totally agree that, times are tough, especially for young people right now that are leaving college with this idea that, hey, I got a degree and now I should go out into the world and be able to get a good job and make good money and, buy a house, buy a car, build a family, all this kind of stuff. At the same time, I fully believe that we here in America specifically are living better than 99% of the people who have ever lived on the earth. I mean, to be honest, right? Like, think about it, right? I've got a car, I've got a job, I've got a home, I've got air conditioning, I've got, water, I've got food. But
that's you. You're way up here. I mean, you're way up here.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, though. We've got an uncountable amount of blessings in our lives. The difficult thing is because a lot of these things are small. Like, look, you're wearing a sweatshirt, man. You're wearing a sweatshirt. You're on a computer. We're on the internet talking. People, 99% of the world has never had access to these things. And so say all that to say, not to discredit what you were saying, but we can't not keep those things in perspective as well.
But technology always goes that way, always goes up and to the right. And since the money is no longer matching where the technology is, I would say that it's almost like a net decrease in overall societal just quality of life, everybody being able to participate in this economy and have a good life. Because Nick, could you have, if Janae said that she was having triplets, because the money doesn't work. Not because, oh shit, I would love to have triplets, I'd love to have 10 kids. Who cares? But
I guess that kind of begs the question on who is responsible for the provision.
How do you mean?
You talk about I think that's a great example. You got triplets coming. Let's say we had triplets coming. The immediate reaction is, whoa, I got to make more money. We got to get more money, right? And that's my responsibility. I've got to go out and I've got to mine some more fiat, and so that we can provide for 3 kids, right?
No, sure.
Now,
that's a great attitude to have.
Well, and I don't disagree with that directly and necessarily, but whenever we talk about divine provision, ultimately at the end of the day, God is our provider. And I think we can run into problems when we put too much of the responsibility on ourselves. And that's not to say that we don't have responsibility to actually go out and put these things into practice and do these things. But at the end of the day, I think that we can do ourselves a disservice if we are relying on ourselves for everything and not saying, hey, man, at the end of the day, I've got faith in the Lord that he's going to provide what we need. Where is that exactly going to come from? We don't always know that answer. Now, that's not to say that we don't plan disagree. And all these kinds of things, right? But we've got a ton of blessings in our lives today. And so just want to say that as the caveat to not lose sight of those things.
I don't disagree with you, sir. I do not disagree with you, but fiat distorts truth. You would agree? The Bible
depends on how we define truth economically. Yeah. I mean, economically,
the Bible is truth to you.
Yeah.
So doesn't that mean that this fiat society is kind of tearing people away from what is really true in your heart?
I think we let it. I don't think it inherently does, but I think it's easy for us to fall into a trap and be pulled away because of the stresses and the worries of the world. Yeah.
Well, that's to be fair. I think I flip-flopped a lot on Elon Musk on this podcast today, actually, because I like the guy, but listen, something's fishy about this. He's got 13 kids. He gaslights everybody about birth rates. And simultaneously, he's hiring H-1B visas, and Americans could not have 3 kids and be on the salaries that he's offering for these jobs and have mom stay at home. And if Elon can't appreciate, in my opinion, the traditional family and building a country where the traditional family thrives before we thrive in technology, whether we thrive, not financially, but until we get back to the point where one parent in the household can go out and earn fiat, and they can have 2 or 3 kids and live a nice life and have a real home and go on a vacation or whatever quality of life people deem to be pretty solid. Until we get the middle class to grow, I don't want to hear about your trip to fucking Mars, okay? Because if you're really America first, there's 330 million people in this country, and credit to you, Nick, that's a great perspective. Yes, this is the best time to ever live, ever, not even close. So the blessings are unbelievable. But I'm talking about the guy who has $400 billion, 13 kids, and is telling people, you can go fuck yourself because I came here on an H-1B visa, so that we need this system. We need some form of this system so that I can hire these people from other countries. I don't disagree. From a Bitcoiner perspective, I want a stronger economy so we can let more people in and we don't need to protect all over the world. But Elon is just so powerful. He's in every discussion. There's so much going on. And I don't appreciate what seems to be a lack of acknowledgement towards the monetary issue, towards what the money is. And I do not appreciate from his take where it's he knows what Bitcoin is. He doesn't really acknowledge it as a solution. Maybe that's on purpose. Maybe that's not. But it just strikes me as odd. I don't disagree with Vivek on the culture. I think fiat does distort reality. But at the same time, let's get America first. You know what I mean? I want to get places too. But I want everybody, or at least a good total of people, right? Because we're never going to get everybody, guys. Okay. We just want a bigger middle class.
A couple of additional thoughts, context on my previous comments. So this is from the parable of the sower, Matthew chapter 13. Jesus tells us a parable, and he starts out saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed as he was scattering the seed, and then he goes through several different examples. The one that I want to focus on, and where I am constantly kind of looking at myself to make sure that to try to keep my focus in the right spot. In verse 7, he says, other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Okay, so he says that, right? And he tells this full parable. And then the disciples came to him and asked in verse 10, why do you speak to the people in parables? And then Jesus replies, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, yada, yada. He goes on, and then he actually explains each portion of the parable. And so that portion where he talks about seed being scattered among the thorns, this is what he says. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. And so think about that, right? The worries of life and the deceitfulness of wealth are the thorns that this seed is being scattered among. It's good soil, but there's thorns also within the soil. Whenever those plants grow up in the thorns ultimately choke the plants, not able to live. And he explains what that means is that the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth are the thorns. And we let's say that we are the seed that's scattered into the good soil that also has thorns in it. If we are getting caught up in the worries and the deceitfulness of wealth of life, then ultimately we will start operating in a state of fear and not in a state of faith. And so I think about that a lot. It's like, man, am I in the thorns right now? Am I in the thorns, worrying about things, having anxiety on things? So anyways, really good thoughts there. And then he also addresses, Christ addresses not being anxious or not worrying in Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through the very end of the chapter. And one of the things he talks about, he says, can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And so that's not to say that we should just throw out all caution and not plan our chart moving forward, because we need to do that. And we need to give that to the Lord to establish. But at the same time, we can't be operating out of fear. We can't be worrying and having anxiety of life. We've got to do the right things we know to do. And then from there, we just got to go 100 miles an hour, right? We always talk about in football, you can't fix effort, but you can fix what it is that you're doing. If you're not going 100%, if you're giving a half-ass effort and you're doing the wrong thing, okay, well, it's like, okay, we can correct the wrong thing, but you got to give a full effort. And if we're not giving full effort, we're operating out of fear, or if we have anxieties or worries, I think that stifles our growth. And so then to go back right to this H-1B stuff, are we operating out of fear of the culture that America may or may not have? And are we not addressing the root problems that are creating this culture that's maybe, quote, undesirable? And if we're not addressing those things, and we're only putting short-term solutions on top of it to solve it, to quote solve it, then like, what are we really doing? Right? It's like, what are we really doing? Hey, you've got some kind of a health issue and you're taking a medication to help with the symptoms, but you're not doing anything to address the actual root cause of this thing. And let's say that it's something that, is not like genetic, that never goes away. Let's say it's some kind of an acute thing, or let's say you got a sprained ankle and you're a runner and you just keep running on it and you just keep putting an ankle brace on your ankle, as opposed to like, hey, let me just like lower my time preference. Let me just take a couple weeks here. Let me take a couple days here to not run as much. Maybe I'll do some, some pliability work, or maybe I'll do some stretching or some light stuff so I can actually recover for the long term, as opposed to continuing to run on it. And what we're doing right now as America is we've got all these root problems, call it an ankle sprain, and we just keep running on it. And we're not actually solving a real problem. We're just spatting up every time we go run. And that's not helping us in the long run. It's actually probably making things worse.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. You know what I think is really interesting, and is probably a good way to wrap up the show. We have these conversations on X now, or formerly known as Twitter. So for everybody crying and complaining and whatever, get on Twitter. Let the brother know. He might take your check mark away. He might try to, I don't think he's deplatformed anybody. He might have. But at the very least, the guy who said that he's for free speech and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, if you go on X and you start complaining to him and then you find that your account's gone, he's going to lose all his credibility overnight anyway. And worrying about his opinion, we won't have to worry much longer, because Americans are probably not going to stand for that. I don't think that'll go very well for Mr. Musk, to be honest. At the end of the day, people need the American consumer. People need us. So we need not really worry about them. If we all actually started waking up and getting together and communicating and really pulling from the same book, they would all have a really tough time containing 330 million people in America. Okay. That it would be a big problem for them. Whether you're white, black, Latino, whatever, we can all get on the side that we want our life. We want to take our energy back. We want to take our money back. We want to take our government back. We could decide that at any point in time, and you never know what's going to make it happen. You never know what's going to trigger it. You don't know what the world's going to look like at that point in time. But I don't really worry, Nick. I mean, like, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts. The only other thing I was going to say is that Dennis Porter has not tweeted in a while, and not to show any hate, Dennis, but like no breaking news. Breaking news, no Dennis Porter after he had a huge Twitter fit. Kind of like he kind of did old Elon Musk. I hope he's celebrating Christmas with his family, taking some time off, you know, like just not thinking about Twitter for a while or trying to do anything, because he's not the worst guy in the world. Anybody who wants to get in politics and use Bitcoin to essentially get himself into politics, it's interesting. I don't know. Now, nobody's really doing that. Nobody's really saying, like, I am trying to use Bitcoin to get a political seat. And I'm like, should we kind of vote the guy in, or like, no, or do you like him? I mean, it's very interesting because at the end of the day, money and Bitcoin aren't everything. There are a lot of other meanings to life. I think that's kind of what you get here on Nick and Griff is we're going to have fun. We're going to live life. We're not going to worry too much about it. But I do enjoy, Nick. I enjoy that Elon Musk is getting shit on by a guy with 300 followers and getting more likes than him, and then he's getting upset about it. That's pretty transparent. So I'll take it. I think it's still a step in the right direction. It'll be interesting to see how these guys rebound going into our next podcast, because this isn't going away. This is like the number one conversation. So it's going to be really interesting.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see how things play out. Hey, if you guys are not watching, we do have video on Spotify and on YouTube. And you can find all of our links at nickandgriffshow.com. It's all spelled out NYCANDGRIFFSHOW.com. Go check us out there. We want to talk with you on Twitter. Now, I'll leave you guys with a couple of thoughts. Seek the Lord, stack some sats, and have a good time. Enjoy life. Just enjoy life. You know, I think so much of the things that we get into, you know, it's so easy to lose track of what really matters. And, you know, we're in the holiday season, right? We just crossed over Christmas. We got New Year coming up. Man, spend some time with some family, have a couple of good conversations, maybe drink a couple of beers, have a good time. Just enjoy the life. We woke up, man. We're alive. We woke up. And so enjoy these things, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.